I gave my son a $300,000 imported pickup truck for his 40th birthday. My daughter-in-law raised her glass and with a mocking smile said, "Here's to the silly mother who tries to buy love like it's freshly baked bread." Everyone laughed. I just smiled, got up, and left without saying a word. But what I did after that night, she'll never forget. Now, if you enjoyed this story, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments what details made your jaw drop. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to see the exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there. If you had seen me 6 months ago standing in the middle of that room with 200 people staring at me, you would have thought I was the most pathetic woman in the world. And maybe you were right. There I was, Margaret Ellis, 67, in my navy blue dress I had bought especially for that night, holding the keys to a $5 million black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon while my daughter-in-law raised her glass of French champagne. "A toast," Vanessa Cole shouted in that voice she perfected in her acting classes, "to the foolish mother who tries to buy love as if it were freshly baked bread." The Emperor Hall of the Marquis Hotel erupted in laughter, nervous laughter from some, cruel cackles from others. My son, Daniel Ellis, lowered his gaze, clenched his fists, but said nothing. He never said anything when she spoke. Do you know what it feels like when 200 pairs of eyes pierce you with pity? It's like your skin is being slowly ripped off. The mariachi band I had hired stopped playing. The Dutch flowers decorating the tables seemed to wither with my humiliation. Even the giant red bow I had placed on the truck seemed to mock me, but I just smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile. I took off the heels I'd worn to make myself look taller. I left them right there on the Italian marble stage and walked barefoot toward the exit, while the navy blue dress swept the floor. I didn't say a single word. Vanessa continued laughing, toasting, celebrating her victory. My son continued looking at the floor. The guests murmured, but none of them, absolutely none of them, imagined what I had begun to plan at that exact moment. You see, when you've built an empire from scratch, when you've survived the death of a husband, when you've raised a child alone while kneading bread at 3 a.m. to pay the rent, you learn that silence is not weakness. Silence is the most powerful weapon there is. That night, while everyone celebrated my humiliation, I had already decided that Vanessa Cole was going to know the true meaning of losing everything. Not in a day, not in a week, but slowly, piece by piece, until she had nothing left but the ashes of her own arrogance. The Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon was still gleaming under the living room lights when I left. 5 million pesos that everyone thought I had wasted in a pathetic attempt to win back my son's love. How wrong they were. That SUV wasn't a gift. It was the bait. And Vanessa, in her infinite arrogance, had taken the bait so hard that she couldn't let go. My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 67 years old, and this is the story of how I destroyed the woman who tried to destroy me. But for you to understand the magnitude of what I did, I need to tell you everything from the beginning, from the day that viper entered my life with her designer heels and crocodile tears. Because what no one knew that night, what not even my own son suspected, was that I had been recording every conversation, documenting every lie, preparing every move for 5 long years. The truck was just the bait. The real show was about to begin. And if you think you know the end of this story, you're wrong, because there are secrets in my family that even I didn't know until recently. Secrets that would change everything. Secrets that would make that night of the toast seem like child's play compared to what would come next. But before I tell you how it all ended, you need to know how it began. How a widow who sold sweetbread in the Xochimilco market ended up owning 22 bakeries, and how her only son, her pride, her reason for living, ended up marrying the devil in Versace. If you're ready to hear this story, if you really want to know how far a mother can go when pushed to the limit, then subscribe now, because what's coming will take your breath away. This isn't just my story. It's the story of all the mothers who have been scorned, humiliated, discarded. And it's proof that you should never, ever underestimate a woman who has survived it all. The origin of the baker. You need to understand something. I wasn't born into money. My father, Edward Gutman, was a bricklayer in Xochimilco. My mother, Martha Gutman, washed other people's clothes on a river rock that still exists, although it's now dry. We were 7 siblings, sleeping in 2 rooms, sharing shoes to go to school, eating beans with salt when there was some, and when there wasn't, well, just salt. I married Robert Ellis at 19. He was a construction supervisor, earning 1,200 pesos a month, and to me, he was a prince. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the Doctores neighborhood. The walls were damp, the roof leaked when it rained, but it was ours. Daniel was born there on September 15th, while the Independence rockets lit up the sky. Robert died when I was 27. A poorly erected scaffold, they said. He fell from the 8th floor of a construction site in Polanco. The company thanked my dead husband with 50,000 pesos in compensation. 50,000 pesos for a life. It wasn't even enough for the funeral. That night, with my 8-year-old baby sleeping in the bed, which still smelled of his father, I made the decision that would change everything. My grandmother Grace had taught me how to make bread when I was a child. It was the only thing I knew how to do well, besides crying. And crying didn't pay the rent. I started selling shells and ears out of a basket outside the Pino Suarez subway station. I would get up at 2 in the morning, knead until 5, bake in the neighbor's oven, which charged me 100 pesos to use, and by 7, I was standing on my corner. Daniel would come with me before school. He helped me shout, "Sweet bread! Bring your warm sweet bread!" Do you know how many times the police chased me away? How many times I had to bribe them with my daily earnings so they wouldn't take my basket? But I kept going, always going. One day, Arthur Sanders, owner of 3 cafes downtown, tried my cheese croissants. He offered to supply me with 200 pieces a day. It was the miracle I had been waiting for. With that money, I was able to rent a tiny space on Regina Street. 4 square meters with a used oven that we bought on credit. Panaderia La Esperanza, the Hope Bakery. I named it after my grandmother. Daniel grew up surrounded by flour and yeast. He did his homework at a small table next to the oven while I worked. At 15, he already knew how to make perfect bolillos. At 18, he kept the books. My boy was brilliant. He studied administration at UNAM while I opened the second bakery in Coyoacan. By the time Daniel turned 30, we already had 11 bakeries. 11. From Xochimilco to Satellite, we employed 87 people, most of them single women like I had been. I paid them well, gave them benefits, and a full Christmas bonus. Some cried when I gave them their first health insurance. I understood those tears. The Viper arrives. That's when Vanessa Cole appeared. It was September 2019. I remember it perfectly because we had just opened our 12th bakery in San Angel. Daniel arrived at the opening party with her on his arm. Tall, slim, like a magazine model, wearing a white dress that probably cost more than I earned in my first year selling bread. She had that artificial beauty you see on television. A nose job, swollen lips, cheekbones that looked like they'd been cut with a knife. "Mom, this is Vanessa Cole, my girlfriend." The way he said, "my girlfriend," as if I had won a prize, as if I had finally achieved something that I, with all my bakeries, couldn't give him. Status. Vanessa hugged me that day, a long, theatrical hug, as she whispered in my ear, "What an inspiring story you have, madam. From a street vendor to this, you must be very proud." Street vendor. Not an entrepreneur, not a businesswoman. Street vendor. But I smiled. Of course I smiled. My son was in love. They were married months later in the former convent of San Hipólito. I paid for everything. The 300,000 peso dress imported from Spain, the floral arrangements brought from Amsterdam, the dinner for 400 guests where they served lobster and French wine. On Vanessa's side, only 20 people came. "My family is very small," she said. "I'm almost an orphan." Like you, she was widowed as young as I was. She always found ways to compare herself to me, to remind me of my tragedies. I gave them a house in Lomas de Chapultepec. 5 million pesos down payment, monthly payments of 80,000 pesos that I paid religiously. I gave them both important positions in the company. Daniel as general director, Vanessa as director of public relations. Although I never knew exactly what public relations she handled, the first 2 years were bearable. Vanessa organized dinners where she invited her friends from the club, women who looked at her as if she were their exotic pet, the one who had caught the son of the millionaire baker. I went to those dinners. I sat in my assigned seat, always the one furthest away from Vanessa, and listened to her reinvent her story each time. Sometimes she was the daughter of diplomats who died in an accident. Other times, her family had lost their fortune in the crisis of '94. My favorite was when she said she had turned down a career in international modeling to marry Daniel. Love is worth more than any runway in Milan. She sighed while her friends applauded her sacrifice. But I noticed things, little things, like that she never talked about her childhood with specific details, like how she didn't have a single family photo before she was 25, how her accent sometimes slipped into something not Mexican, something she quickly covered with a nervous laugh. And then there were the expenses. Good Lord, the expenses. 80,000 peso purses that appeared every week. Business trips to Miami that cost more than the annual salary of 5 employees. A renovation of her office that cost 3 million pesos, more than it cost to build an entire bakery. When I mentioned this to Daniel, he looked at me as if I had betrayed him. Mom, we're not in Xochimilco anymore. This is our life now. Vanessa knows what she's doing. She understands this world better than we do. That world, the world where I apparently didn't belong. The decline and the eavesdropping. It was in my 3rd year that things began to change more obviously. Vanessa convinced Daniel that I needed more rest. Your mom has worked so hard, my love. She deserves to enjoy her old age. Old age? I was 64 and I used to get up at 5 in the morning to supervise production. But suddenly, I was an old woman. They started to exclude me from important meetings. To avoid stressing you out, Mom. They changed suppliers without consulting me. Vanessa has better connections. They hired a strategic consultant, Vanessa's cousin, of course, who charged 200,000 pesos a month for telling us that we needed to modernize. And I, stupid Margaret Ellis, allowed it, because every time I tried to protest, Daniel looked at me with those tired eyes and said, Mom, please, Vanessa just wants to help. Can't you trust my wife? Trust. What a dangerous word when your own son uses it against you. By the 4th year, I had lost control of almost everything. I was still the owner on paper, but they made the decisions. The bank passwords for security. Daniel signed the new contracts without reading them because Vanessa had already reviewed them. And then came the day that changed everything. The day I overheard a conversation I shouldn't have overheard. It was a Thursday in March. I remember it because I had just gotten back from my monthly checkup. Dr. Frank Nolan had told me my blood pressure was a little high. Nothing serious, but that I should reduce my stress. I almost laughed in his face. Reduce my stress while I watched my life being dismantled company by company? I entered the house in the hills without announcing myself. I still had keys, although Vanessa had suggested 3 times that I return them for privacy. My privacy, apparently, because I had paid for the house. I heard voices in the study. Vanessa was talking on the phone. Her voice had that sweet tone she used when she was plotting something. I stayed in the hallway, pressed against the wall like a thief in my own investment. No, my love, listen carefully, Vanessa said. The old lady is perfect for the plan. Dr. Richard Miles already gave me the papers. We just need 3 witnesses to confirm erratic behavior. I already have the maid and the gardener. With 1 more, we can declare her mentally incompetent. My heart stopped. I literally felt it stop beating for a second. Daniel, please. Daniel does what I tell him. He's so tired of being the baker's son that he'll do anything to make it on his own. The idiot doesn't realize that without Mommy's money, he's a nobody. Laughter. I heard laughter on the other end of the phone. 6 months tops, and we have everything. The 22 bakeries, the bank accounts, the properties, everything goes to Daniel. And when I get divorced next year, I get half. 11 bakeries, Jason Miller. 11 damn bakeries that are each worth between 8 and 15 million. Jason Miller. I never knew who Jason Miller was. Maybe I'll never know. Maybe it doesn't matter. The truck is perfect. I've already convinced him that his mom wants to buy him something extravagant for his birthday. When he spends $5 million on a whim, we'll have perfect proof that he's losing his mind. Who in their right mind gives away a $5 million truck? I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. The cold marble pierced my dress. My son, my Daniel, the child I carried for 9 months, whom I breastfed with these breasts, whom I raised selling bread in the rain. Did he know about this? Oh, don't be melodramatic, Jason Miller. We're not going to kill her. We're just going to put her in Villa Hermosa. It's a luxury nursing home in Cuernavaca. It even has a view of the mountains. She'll live out her final years drugged and happy. It's more than that street vendor deserves. I stood up in silence. Every muscle in my body trembled, but not from fear, from fury. From that cold fury you only feel when you realize you've been blind by choice. I left the house quietly. I drove to my apartment in Polanco, the only place they hadn't been allowed to touch, and poured myself a tequila. Then another, and another. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room looking at photos of Daniel, as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, searching for the exact moment I lost him, where my son became the puppet of a woman we didn't even know who she really was. The counterattack begins. The next day I did 3 things. First, I visited my trusted notary, Mr. Henry Ellis. No relation, just coincidence. I asked him for copies of all my legal documents, deeds, articles of incorporation, everything. "Any problem, Ms. Margaret?" he asked. "Prevention, Mr. Henry, just prevention." Second, I hired a private investigator, David Ross, a former military officer, specialist in corporate fraud. I gave him an envelope with 200,000 pesos in cash and a single instruction. I want to know everything about Vanessa Cole, everything. Third, and this was the hardest, I started to act. If they wanted a senile old lady, I'd give them exactly that. I started slowly. I forgot the names of employees I'd known for years. I got confused about important dates. Once, I arrived at a board meeting in slippers, pretending I'd forgotten to change my shoes. I saw the look of satisfaction in Vanessa's eyes. I saw her squeeze Daniel's hand as if to say, "See, I told you so." Meanwhile, David Ross did his work. The first piece of information arrived 2 weeks later. Vanessa Cole didn't exist before 2015. There were no school records, no birth certificate in the civil registry, no credit history. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere at age 25. The second piece of information was more interesting. There was a Valentina Herrera, but she had died in 2014 in a bus accident in Chiapas. Same date of birth, same place of origin as my daughter-in-law. Someone had stolen the identity of a dead woman. The third piece of information was the bombshell. Her real name was Amy Gutierrez, born in Caracas, Venezuela. She arrived in Mexico in 2014 fleeing fraud charges. She had defrauded 3 families in Caracas by posing as the heiress to an oil fortune. But the best, the absolutely delicious, was what David Ross discovered in the 4th week. Amy Gutierrez was married, legally married, since 2013, to a man named George Lewis, again, no relation, in Maracaibo, Venezuela. She was never divorced, which meant that her marriage to my son was completely illegal. I had everything I needed to destroy her, but I wasn't going to do it quickly. No, no, no. She had planned my destruction slowly, meticulously. I would do exactly the same. I continued playing my role, each day a little more confused, a little more fragile. Vanessa was so sure of her victory that she let her guard down. She began to be more obvious with her contempt, more cruel with her comments. Once, at a family dinner, she served me food on a plastic plate while everyone else used the china. It's just that sometimes you drop things, mother-in-law. We don't want accidents. Daniel said nothing, just looked at his plate and continued eating. Another time he found me looking at an album of old photos and snatched them away. "Oh, Ms. Margaret, living in the past isn't healthy. You have to look forward." Then he threw them in the trash in front of me. They were the only photos I had of Robert. I rescued them from the trash that night, crying with rage, not sadness. And then came the conversation about the truck. "Mom," Daniel said to me one day with Vanessa clinging to his arm like a tick, "my 40th birthday is coming up. I know you've always wanted to give me something special." "Of course, son. What do you want?" Vanessa got there first. We saw a beautiful Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. It would be the perfect gift from a loving mother. "How much does it cost?" 5 million pesos, Vanessa said with that viper-like smile. "But you can afford it, right, mother-in-law? After all, he's your only son." I looked her straight in the eyes. For the first time in months, I dropped the senile old lady mask and looked at her as what she was, my prey. "Of course, Vanessa. I'll give my son exactly what he deserves." She interpreted my look as defeat. How wrong she was. I bought the truck, but I also made other purchases. I installed cameras in every bakery, in my apartment, even in my purse. I hired 2 additional notaries to prepare documents that Vanessa would never see coming. I opened bank accounts in 3 different banks where I moved amounts she didn't know existed. And most importantly, I started recording everything. Every conversation, every humiliation, every lie. Daniel's birthday was approaching. Vanessa threw the most lavish party you could imagine. She invited everyone in society she wanted to impress. She spent 2 million pesos just on the organization. "It's going to be the night of our lives," she told me the day before. "The night when everyone will see who really rules in this family." She was right. It would be exactly that. But she didn't know I had an ace up his sleeve, an ace he had been keeping, nurturing, and preparing for months. Birthday night arrived, and with it the beginning of the end for Vanessa Cole. Or should I say, Amy Gutierrez de Ellis, the masterpiece of manipulation. The first 5 years of Daniel's marriage were a masterpiece of manipulation. Vanessa didn't arrive destroying. She arrived constructing, building an image, a narrative, an invisible prison around my son. It started with small, almost imperceptible details. He called me 3 times a day. "Mother-in-law, he's already had breakfast. I sent his favorite bread with a chauffeur. Ms. Margaret, Daniel is worried because he hasn't taken his vitamins. Mommy Margaret." Yes, he started calling me Mommy. I found a wonderful doctor for his knees. Every call was an act. I knew this because when Helen Carter hung up, my trusted employee of 30 years, she told me how Vanessa would make fun of me as soon as she finished the call. "Stupid old woman," she heard her say once. "She thinks I'm her personal nurse." But around Daniel, she was different. That's when she put on her best performance. She had memorized my recipes. When he came home tired from work, she served him mole negro. "Daniel, just like your mother's." A lie. She bought it at a restaurant in Santa Fe and reheated it. I once saw the receipt in her trash. 3,000 pesos for a liter of mole, which she passed off as hers. She organized family Sundays where she invited me to her house, my house, the one I paid for, and I sat at the head of the table while she served. "You've already worked hard, ma'am. Now it's my turn to take care of this family." The neighbors saw her and commented, "Such a devoted daughter-in-law." What an example of filial love. No one saw when she served me the leftovers. No one noticed that my coffee was always cold. No one realized that the flowers she supposedly sent me every week were left over from her social events. But her masterpiece, her true genius, was how she isolated Daniel from me without him even noticing. "My love, your mom looks tired. It's better not to bother her with company problems. Daniel, your mom needs to rest. I'll take care of bringing her the reports. Honey, don't tell her about the bank loan. You'll only worry her." Every sentence was a brick in the wall she was building between us. And Daniel, exhausted from working 12 hours a day, grateful to have a wife who cared for his mother, accepted everything. Vanessa was also smart with money. She didn't steal blatantly. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, she created a foundation, Mujeres Emprendedoras de Mexico, Entrepreneurial Women of Mexico. A beautiful name, isn't it? Every month, the company donated 500,000 pesos to that foundation, to help women like you were, mother-in-law, those who start from the bottom. The foundation existed, of course, and even organized events where Vanessa shone in 200,000 peso dresses, talking about her commitment to working women, while 90% of the money disappeared in administrative expenses. Her cousin was the treasurer, her best friend, the secretary. Her stylist, yes, she had a stylist, he was the corporate image coordinator with a salary of 80,000 pesos a month. And then there were the renovations to the bakeries. Modernization, she called it. She replaced the stone ovens we had used for 30 years with Italian ones that cost 3 times as much and produced soulless bread. She renovated the traditional facades with something that looked like something out of a pretentious architecture magazine. "We need to attract millennials, mother-in-law." Sales began to decline. Longtime customers complained. "The bread doesn't taste the same anymore, Margaret," Linda Parker told me, who had been buying at our first bakery since 1995. But when I mentioned it to Daniel, Vanessa intervened. "It's resistance to change, Mommy Margaret. It's normal. You'll see that in a few months, sales double." They doubled, yes, downwards. By the third year, we had lost 30% of our regular customers. But the reports Vanessa showed Daniel said otherwise. She had learned to cook up numbers like she did her makeup every morning. And then she began her psychological campaign against me. "Ms. Margaret, don't you remember that you already paid me this?" When you had never even asked me for money. "Yesterday, my mother-in-law told me that I could exchange uniforms, even though we had never even talked about uniforms." "Mommy, are you sure we didn't agree on this at the meeting?" When I hadn't even attended that meeting. She planted seeds of doubt, made me question my own memory. Once, she even went so far as to move my keys, my purse, my glasses, and then find them in absurd places. "Here are your glasses, mother-in-law, in the refrigerator. You see why I worry about you." Daniel started looking at me differently, with concern, with pity. My own son looked at me as if I were a time bomb about to explode. "Mom, maybe you should see a specialist. Mom, Vanessa says you've been forgetting things. Mom, are you sure? Are you sure you're okay?" And I, who could have shown him the recordings I already had by then, who could have revealed who his wife really was, kept quiet, because I needed Vanessa to trust me. I needed her to completely let her guard down. The mask of the perfect daughter-in-law only fell away when we were alone. That's where Amy's true soul appeared. The confinement plot. The plan to declare me mentally incompetent began on a Tuesday in October. I remember why, that day, Vanessa came to my apartment with Dr. Richard Miles, a psychiatrist who seemed more interested in his Rolex watch than in my mental health. "It's just a routine evaluation, mother-in-law, to reassure myself that everything is okay." The doctor asked me questions for 2 hours. What day was it? Who was the president? What was 17 plus 38? I answered everything perfectly, but I noticed Vanessa signaling to her when I wasn't looking directly. "The lady is showing early signs of senile dementia," the wretch declared as he put away his recorder. "I recommend constant supervision and evaluation of her ability to handle financial decisions." She was paid 300,000 pesos for that false diagnosis. I know this because I already hacked Vanessa's email. Well, not me. Helen Carter's son, Michael Carter, who studied computer science, did it because he thought his mother would have a job for life. After the doctor came the fabricated incidents. Vanessa started organizing meals where she put me in impossible situations. She served me boiling soup, and when I burned my tongue and spit it out, I would tell everyone, "Oh, the lady is not controlling her reflexes well anymore." She gave me children's utensils, and when I asked for more, she sighed dramatically. "This is the 3rd time this week she's forgotten how to use regular cutlery." Once, at her friend's birthday, Amy gave me a headache pill that made me so dizzy I had to hold onto the walls to walk. See, that's why we don't leave her alone. She takes the wrong medications. But the masterstroke was when she forged my signature on an 800,000 peso check for her phantom foundation. When I complained at the bank, she had set the stage. She had told the manager with crocodile tears that her mother-in-law was losing her memory and signing things without remembering them. "Mrs. Ellis," the manager said to me with that condescension they use with old people, "maybe you should consider giving your son power of attorney to manage your finances." Daniel was there looking at me with a mixture of embarrassment and concern. "Mom, it's okay. It was a mistake, but I believe the Lord is right. Vanessa and I can help you with this. My professional..." Do you know what it feels like when your own child, your blood, your everything looks at you as if you were a problem to be solved? It's like your soul is being ripped into pieces. That night, I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's death. But between tears, I made a decision. If they wanted war, they would have war. I began my counterattack subtly. First, I visited Dr. Patricia Owen, a neurologist with 30 years of experience and Dr. Richard Miles's most important professional enemy since he stole her research at the university. "Doctor, I need complete neurological evaluations, and I need them to be irrefutable." I underwent everything: MRIs, EEGs, and 8-hour cognitive tests. The results were overwhelming. My brain was healthier than many 40-year-olds. Then I began documenting everything with an unhealthy obsession. I recorded every conversation with my hidden cell phone. I scanned every document in triplicate. I backed up every banking transaction with screenshots and account statements. I hired 3 new employees at the bakeries, women I trusted completely and who were actually witnesses. I paid them extra to observe and report everything Vanessa did. One was a former bank employee and detected irregularities in the accounting that I pretended not to notice. Another was a former auditor for the SAT, Tax Administration Service, and found millions in fake invoices. The third was simply very observant and recorded Vanessa taking money from the cash registers when she thought no one was watching. But the smartest thing I did was to hire Marina Davis, a retired soap opera actress who now taught classes. I paid her 200,000 pesos to teach me how to act. Yes, how to act. How to fake dementia believably, but not exaggeratedly. How to have episodes at exactly the right moments to make Vanessa more confident. Once, at an important meeting with investors, I pretended to mistake Vanessa for my dead sister. "Rose, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Oaxaca." Vanessa immediately took advantage. "Look, gentlemen, this is why we need to restructure the executive branch of the company." What he didn't know was that I had recorded his phone conversation that morning, where he told them exactly what he was going to do and how they were going to respond. The investors themselves were part of his plan. Namely, Vanessa was so sure of my dementia that she became careless. She spoke openly in front of me about her plans. She moved money without hiding it. She even showed me the papers for confinement in Villa Hermosa by mistake, and then feigned horror. "Oh, mother-in-law, this wasn't for you. It's for an aunt of a friend in Villa Hermosa." 70,000 pesos a month to keep me sedated in a room measuring 3 by 3 meters. They had even paid the first quarter in advance. The date was set after Daniel's birthday, after the $5 million truck proved my mental incapacity. But I also had a date set and a plan I had perfected over months of humiliation and pain. The final battle was approaching, and Vanessa had no idea that she had already lost the war. The dispossession and the final preparations. The dispossession began with the bakery Esperanza de Coyoacán, my second branch, the one I opened with the sweat of 5 years selling bread on the street. One Monday, I arrived and found a closed for remodeling sign. No one had told me anything. "It's a surprise we had for you, mother-in-law," Vanessa told me with her full smile. "We're going to turn it into a boutique cafe. Traditional bakeries don't make any money anymore." When I saw the plans, I almost threw up. They had destroyed the stone oven I built with my own hands. The Talavera tiles I laid down one by one had been thrown in the trash. In their place were minimalist white walls and a 2 million peso coffee machine. "Where are my employees?" I asked for Rachel Green, Mary Lopez, and Carla Johnson, who had been with me for 15 years. "We fired them. They didn't know how to make cappuccinos, liquidated as if they were defective objects. Rachel had 3 children in college. Mary supported her ailing mother. Carla had just become a widow, but that didn't matter to Vanessa." The second to fall was the Xochimilco bakery, the most profitable, the one that brought in $3 million a month. Vanessa turned it into a gastronomic experience, where a bolillo cost 60 pesos and came with French butter in a small china dish. The neighborhood residents could no longer shop there. Her customers were now hipsters from La Condesa who came by Uber to take photos for Instagram. By the time she took the third bakery, the one on the satellite, I could no longer even cry. I just watched as they dismantled my life piece by piece while pretending not to understand what was happening. "Sign here, Mrs. Margaret." "What is this, Vanessa?" "Nothing important, mother-in-law, just boring paperwork." Paperwork that transferred the operating rights to a company Vanessa had created, Grupo Gastronomico VRM, the initials of Vanessa and Daniel Ellis. My last name. My legacy used to rob me. But the moment that broke my heart was when I heard Daniel defend his wife. We were in his office, which used to be my office, and I had just received the sales report. We had lost 40% of revenue in 6 months. "Son, this isn't working. The clients are leaving. Mom, don't you understand modern business?" "I don't understand, son. I built this empire from scratch." "That was 30 years ago, Mom. The world has changed. Vanessa has an MBA from Harvard." Lie. Vanessa bought that diploma online for $5,000. David Ross, my investigator, had even gotten me the PayPal receipt. "Daniel, please listen to me. Something's not right with your wife." That's when it exploded. My son, my baby, screamed at me for the first time in his life. "Stop it, Mom. Stop attacking Vanessa. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. You're just jealous because you're no longer the center of attention, because I don't need you anymore." Every word was a stab. I slowly stood up with what little dignity I had left and walked toward the door. "Mom, wait." I didn't mean to. "Okay, son, you're right. You don't need me anymore." That night, in my apartment, I opened the safe I had hidden behind a painting of the Virgin of Guadalupe. Inside were all the documents David Ross had obtained: Amy Gutierrez's identity evidence, the bank statements from the Cayman Islands, where she was diverting money, the recordings where she planned my internment. But there was also something else, something neither Vanessa nor Daniel knew. 5 years before Vanessa appeared, when the business began to grow exponentially, my accountant, old Samuel Price, gave me some advice. "Ms. Margaret, protect your assets. You never know." I followed his advice. I created a holding company in Panama, completely legal, where the real assets lay. The 22 bakeries Vanessa thought she controlled were just franchises. The name, the recipes, the trademark rights, everything was in that holding company, of which I was the sole owner. Vanessa was stealing empty shells, but there was more. For the past 6 months, while feigning dementia, he had been buying properties through frontmen, 7 locations in the best areas of the city, and had secretly hired all of them. The employees Vanessa had fired. Daniel's birthday was approaching. Vanessa had organized the party of the century. She had invited 300 people, spent $2 million on decorations, hired Tigres del Norte to perform live. "It's going to be epic, mother-in-law," she told me as she checked the guest list. "Everyone is going to see the incredible gift you're giving your son." 5 million pesos for a pickup truck. How generous of you. I looked into her eyes for a second, just a second, letting her see the truth. I let her see that I knew everything, but before she could process what she'd seen, I went back to my confused old lady act. "Yes, my little girl, I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve." Vanessa laughed, a laugh that would soon freeze in her throat, because I had invited a few extra people to the party, people Vanessa hadn't expected, people who would change everything. The bomb was about to explode. The perfect bait buying that Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon was the most painful and liberating moment of my life. Painful because it confirmed that my son valued money more than his mother. Liberating because it was the perfect bait for my plan. I went to the Mercedes-Benz dealership in Polanco on a Wednesday morning. Vanessa insisted on accompanying me to help her avoid confusion, mother-in-law. She was wearing a red dress that screamed money and a smile that screamed victory. The salesman, a young man named Ethan Brooks, served us with that mixture of admiration and greed that those who sell luxury possess. Vanessa immediately took control. "We want the most equipped G-Wagon they have, the black AMG G63 with caramel-colored leather interior." "Excellent choice, ma'am." "That configuration is priced at 5,200,000 pesos. "Perfect," Vanessa said before I could speak. "My mother-in-law will pay cash." Ethan Brooks almost choked. "Cash, bank transfer," I corrected him. "But I want some special modifications." Vanessa looked at me strangely. "What? Modifications, mother-in-law?" "I want them to engrave 'For Daniel with eternal love from your mother' on the leather headrests, and I want a personalized license plate." "Of course she wants the license plate to say 40, right?" Vanessa laughed. "Oh, mother-in-law, how clever, right? For her 40th birthday." It wasn't because of that, but I let her believe whatever she wanted. During the 3 weeks it took to prepare the truck, Vanessa couldn't contain her excitement. She told everyone about the excessive gift that poor Mrs. Margaret insisted on buying. "You see how she is," she told her friends at the club. "She spends uncontrollably. That's why we need to protect her from herself." She organized the most lavish party I'd ever seen. She rented the Emperor Room at the Marquis Hotel, the same one where the richest politicians and businessmen in the country got married. She hired the best event planners, the ones who charged 500,000 pesos just for the planning. The guest list was a show in itself. She had invited the entire society she wanted to impress, businessmen, influencers, even a couple of soap opera actors. But above all, she had invited the potential partners Danielle had been courting to expand the business. "This party is going to be our coronation," I heard him say on the phone. After this, no one will doubt who runs the Ellis Bakery empire. 3 days before the party, I made my own discreet, personal invitations, hand-delivered out of hope. I invited George Lewis, Vanessa's legal husband, who had just arrived from Venezuela after years of searching for her. David Ross had found him driving a taxi in Tijuana, trying to raise money to hire a detective. I paid for his flight, the hotel, and 50,000 pesos for her presence. I invited the real district attorney, Robert Miles, not the corrupt psychiatrist, but his twin brother, a prosecutor specializing in financial fraud, who had been investigating his brother for 2 years for selling false diagnoses. I invited Dr. Patricia Owen, the neurologist who had all my studies proving my perfect mental health, along with video evidence that I had been faking the episodes of dementia. I invited the real owners of the investors Vanessa had deceived, people who had lost millions in her previous scams and had been searching for her for years. And I invited Amy Gutierrez, the real Valentina Herrera, who hadn't died in any accident. She was alive and well in Chiapas, very surprised to discover that someone had stolen her identity and declared her guilty, dead. But my star guest was someone else, someone no one expected. The night of the toast. The day of the party arrived. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I had bought especially for the occasion. It wasn't expensive or ostentatious, but I looked dignified. I saw myself as what I was, a warrior about to win her last battle. I arrived at the venue early. The truck was already there, shining in the headlights, with a gigantic red bow that Vanessa had insisted on putting up to make it look more like a gift, mother-in-law. The guests began to arrive. Vanessa shone like never before in a 200,000 peso gold dress that she had bought with money from my bakeries. She kissed cheeks, spread smiles, made sure everyone knew who the real hostess was. Daniel arrived an hour late, as she had planned, to make a grand entrance, she had said. When he entered, the mariachis began to play the mañanitas, the waiters uncorked champagne, and Vanessa led him to where the truck was. "Look, everyone," Vanessa shouted, taking the microphone, "the gift from a loving mother to her only son." That's when I stood up and walked toward them. Everyone fell silent. I took the truck keys from a glass box and approached the microphone. "Before handing over this gift," I said clearly, "I want to make a toast." Vanessa handed me a glass with a condescending smile. "Of course, mother-in-law, say a few words." I raised my glass and looked directly into my son's eyes. "I toast the truth, because the truth, even if it hurts, always comes to light." That's when my special guests appeared, the allies and the final blow. While Vanessa plotted my destruction, I wasn't alone. I had allies she never saw coming. Women who had been watching silently, waiting for the exact moment to act. The first was Helen Carter, my trusted employee. But Helen Carter was much more than an employee. She was my soul sister, the one who helped me raise Daniel when I was working 18-hour days. Her son Michael Carter, who is now a systems engineer, grew up with Daniel. They were like brothers. Until Vanessa arrived and convinced my son that it wasn't appropriate to associate with the servants. Helen Carter had been recording everything, every humiliation, every theft, every lie. She had an old cell phone that she hid in her apron and had documented 3 years of abuse. Videos of Vanessa taking money from the registers, audio of her mocking me with her friends, photos of documents she signed by forging my handwriting. "Mrs. Margaret," he said to me one night, crying, "it breaks my heart to see how he treats her." And Daniel, oh, Daniel was lost. The second ally was a surprise even to me, Christine Dawson, Vanessa's best friend. Yes, the same one who laughed at all the humiliations, the one who applauded her cruelties. It turns out Christine Dawson had also been Vanessa's victim. She came to me one afternoon in my apartment, trembling like a leaf. "Ms. Margaret, I need to talk to you. Vanessa stole 3 million pesos from me." The story was predictable. Vanessa had convinced her to invest in a business importing designer bags. The business didn't exist. The money disappeared, and when Christine Dawson confronted her, Vanessa threatened to destroy her marriage, revealing a fabricated infidelity. "I have all the messages, the transfers, the fake contracts," Christine Dawson told me, handing me a USB flash drive. "But there's more. Vanessa has a secret account where she keeps everything she steals. The password is the birthday of her first husband. her first husband, George Lewis, the one who was legally married to her. The third ally was the most unexpected, my notary, Rebecca Montgomery. A 60-year-old woman, tough as nails, who had seen too many cases of manipulative wives destroying family assets. "Margaret," she told me in her office overlooking Reforma, "what's happening is criminal, and I have an idea." Her idea was brilliant. While Vanessa thought she was transferring the bakeries into her name, she was actually signing documents that didn't say what she thought. Rebecca Montgomery had used an age-old legal trick. The transfers required a second validation signature that never arrived. All the papers Vanessa had falsified were legally disabled. Also, Rebecca Montgomery added with a scary smile, "I have a cousin in the special prosecutor's office for financial crimes. He's going to be very interested in the case of his daughter-in-law's phantom foundation." But my most valuable ally was someone Vanessa had forgotten existed. Rose Cole, her own mother. David Ross found her in Caracas, living in a charity home. Vanessa, or Amy Gutierrez, her real name, had abandoned her 10 years earlier, telling her she was going to marry a Mexican millionaire and that he would come back for her. "My daughter was always ambitious," Rose Cole told me over a video call with tears in her eyes. "Since she was a child, she lied, stole, and manipulated. I thought she would change, but when she stole her father's life savings and let him die without being able to pay for the hospital, I knew I had raised a monster." Rose Cole had something invaluable. Amy Gutierrez's original birth certificate, her school records where she had been expelled for theft, and most importantly, an arrest warrant from Venezuela for fraud that was still visible. "Ms. Margaret," she told me, "help me come to Mexico. I want to see my daughter's face when she finds out that her mother is alive and willing to testify against her." I paid for her flight, put her up in a discreet hotel in Coyoacan, and prepared her for the party. Meanwhile, I continued perfecting my act. Every day I seemed more confused, more fragile. Vanessa was so intoxicated with her upcoming victory that she didn't notice when I installed cameras in her house. She didn't see when I copied all her files from the computer. She didn't realize her phone was tapped. A week before the birthday, I heard her talking to someone named Jason Miller. After the party, we admitted the old woman. "I already have the nurses hired. They'll come at 3 a.m. when everyone is drunk. They'll take her sedated, and by then Daniel wake up, his mother will already be in Villahermosa. And if the son objects, he won't. I'm going to tell him that his mother tried to commit suicide. I have sleeping pills that I'm going to put in his bag. With that and the episode in the van, any judge will rule in our favor." I heard my civil death sentence with a calm that surprised me. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a cold determination. That night, I called all my allies. The day of the party. I need them to be ready. We're going to give Vanessa the show of her life. Christine Dawson confirmed that she would bring the evidence of the fraud. Rebecca Montgomery would have the legal documents ready. Rose Cole would be waiting in a hotel room. Helen Carter would have all the recordings on a laptop connected to the screens in the living room. And I had the final bombshell, something I had discovered just 2 days before, and that I would change. Everything. Vanessa wasn't just married to George Lewis. She was pregnant with Jason Miller, her lover. The father wasn't Daniel. The war was about to end, and I had all the weapons. The secret empire and the final betrayal. 3 nights before Daniel's birthday, I drove alone to Guadalajara. I told everyone I was going to visit a sick cousin. A lie. I was going to see Alexander Ellis, the best notary in Jalisco and, by divine coincidence, my late Robert's first cousin. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" she asked me after reviewing the documents I brought her. "More sure than ever, Alexander. My son chose his path, now I choose mine." That night, I signed a new testament, one no one knew about, one that would leave Vanessa and Daniel exactly what they deserved. But the will was only part of the plan. What was truly brilliant was what I had built, in secret for the last 5 years, while everyone thought I was a helpless old lady. You see, when I began to suspect Vanessa, I opened a parallel company, Panificadora Esperanza SADCB, Hope Bakeries, registered in the name of a trust of which I was the sole beneficiary. While Vanessa was stealing from the bakeries she knew, I was building an empire she never noticed. 7 new bakeries in Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Querétaro, all run by the employees Vanessa had fired for incompetence. Rachel Green, Mary Lopez, Carla Johnson. All of them were now managers with profit sharing. They billed 8 million pesos a month, money that went directly into accounts only I knew about. But that wasn't all. During my medical visits to Houston, which Vanessa thought were for dementia treatments, I was actually closing deals with American investors. I had sold the international franchise of my recipes for $15 million. Yes, dollars. The money was in a trust in Texas, untouchable by Mexican law, waiting for my signal. Ms. Margaret, James Patterson, the CEO of American Bakery Corporation, told me, "Your recipes are pure gold. We're going to open 50 stores in California and Texas." While I was signing that contract, Vanessa was in Mexico stealing crumbs. Back in my apartment in Polanco, I took out the safe hidden behind the painting of the Virgin. Inside, along with all the documents I had collected, I added the New Testament. But there was also something else, a letter for Daniel. A letter that I had rewritten 100 times and that I would deliver only if things went as I hoped. "My son," the letter began, "when if you read this, you'll probably hate me, but I prefer your honest hatred to your manipulated love." The day before the party, I put the final pieces of the puzzle together. First, I visited my bank and transferred 5 million pesos to a special account. It wasn't for the truck. That was already paid for. It was for something much better. Then, I met with the real employees of Villa Hermosa, the nursing home where Vanessa planned to admit me. "Dr. Mark Jacobs," I told the director, "my daughter-in-law paid 3 months in advance to have me committed against my will. Here is the receipt." I showed him the copy I had taken from Vanessa's purse. "This is kidnapping, and you would be accomplices." The man paled. "Madam Ellis, we didn't know. She said you had signed the papers. It's a lie, but I'm proposing a deal. You're going to do exactly what I'm going to ask, and I won't report you. What's more, I'm paying you double what she gave you." The plan was simple. When the nurses came for me, they would take someone else, someone who had agreed to help me for 100,000 pesos and the promise of a long vacation. That night, the last before my birthday, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, drinking cinnamon tea like my grandmother Grace taught me. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang. It was a voice message from Vanessa that she had sent by mistake, or perhaps trying to torture me. "Jason Miller, my love. After tomorrow, we're free. The old woman goes to the nursing home, Daniel keeps the guilt and the debts, and we go to Switzerland with all the money. The baby will be born in Europe, far from this hell. I love you. The baby, the child my son thought was his." I took my recorder and saved that message. It was the last piece of evidence I needed. The reckoning. The birthday dawned sunny, without a cloud in the sky. It was March 15th. Curiously, the Ides of March, the day Julius Caesar was assassinated. How appropriate. I showered slowly, combed my hair carefully, put on the navy blue dress. In the mirror, I saw Margaret Ellis, not the victim Vanessa had created, but the warrior I always was. Before leaving, I made one last call. "Helen, activate the plan. It's time." Somewhere in the city, my allies were preparing. The screens in the living room had been hacked by Michael Carter, Helen Carter's son. The videos were ready to be shown. The special guests were in position, and I, with the truck keys in my bag, along with a USB flash drive containing 3 years of documented crimes, headed to the party. Vanessa believed that night would be my final humiliation. I had no idea it would be hers. When I entered the Emperor room, Vanessa was already in her element. She greeted the guests like a queen with her gold dress that sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. Daniel stood uncomfortable beside her in his tuxedo, smiling that forced smile he put on when she displayed it as a trophy. "There is the star of the night," Vanessa shouted when she saw me, with that fake voice she used in public. "The generous mother who gives away $5 million pickup trucks." 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some with mockery, others with pity, most with that cruel morbidness of those who enjoy watching others fall. I slowly approached, smiling. Vanessa hugged me theatrically for the photos. "It's your time, mother-in-law," she whispered in my ear. "After tonight, everyone will know you're crazy." "You're right," I whispered back. "After tonight, everyone will know the truth." She laughed, thinking I was delirious. Dinner went according to her script. Vanessa had prepared everything to make me look bad. My plate was different from the others. Mushy food, because the lady has trouble chewing. My glass had water in it while everyone else drank wine. It's just that with her medication, she can't drink. My chair was moved away from the main table so I'd be more comfortable. Every humiliation was met with nervous giggles from the guests. I saw some important businessmen exchange glances. I saw the wives of the partners whispering. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Poor old woman. At 10 p.m., it was time for the toast. Vanessa took the microphone with her glass of Chandon champagne, 3,000 pesos a bottle. "A toast," she shouted in her voice, trained to feign emotion, "to the foolish mother who tries to buy love like fresh bread." The room erupted in laughter. Cruel, heartless, horrible laughter. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, calmly took off my heels, and walked barefoot toward the exit. But before I reached the door, I stopped and turned back. "You're right, Vanessa," I said, taking the microphone she had left. "I'm a fool. I was foolish for trusting, foolish for believing, foolish for not seeing what everyone here is going to see now." I took out my cell phone and pressed send. On the giant screens in the living room, a video began to play. It was Vanessa, in my house, taking money from my purse while I slept. Her voice was clearly audible. Stupid old woman, she doesn't even realize I'm stealing from her. The murmurs immediately began. Vanessa ran to the screens. "Turn that off! It's fake! It's edited!" But the videos continued. Vanessa signing documents with my name. Vanessa at the bank saying her mother-in-law had dementia. Vanessa with Dr. Richard Miles, paying her 300,000 pesos for the false diagnosis. "Daniel!" she shouted desperately. "Do something!" My son was paralyzed, watching his world crumble. "Hang on," I said into the microphone. "The best is yet to come." The next recording was from the day before. Vanessa talking to Jason Miller. "The baby isn't Daniel's, love, but he's so idiot who will never take a paternity test." Tonya, A stifled gasp filled the room. Daniel went white as a sheet. "Baby?" he asked, his voice cracking. "What baby?" Vanessa was trapped. She couldn't deny the videos, she couldn't deny her voice, she couldn't deny anything. "But there's more," I continued. "Let me introduce some special guests." The doors opened. First in walked George Lewis, Vanessa's legal husband. "Hello, Amy Gutierrez," he said with a Venezuelan accent. 50 years searching for you, my love, and you're still married to me." Vanessa looked like she was about to faint. "No, you... what?" Then the real Valentina Herrera walked in, alive and well. "Nice to meet you," the woman said. "I'm Amy Gutierrez, the real one, and I'm here to report identity theft." Then District Attorney Robert Miles, brother of the corrupt doctor, entered. "Mrs. Amy Gutierrez is arrested for fraud, document forgery, identity theft, and bigamy." But the final blow came from the last person to enter, Rose Cole, Vanessa's mother. "My daughter," the woman said with tears in her eyes, "it was worth it." "Was it worth destroying another family like you destroyed ours?" Vanessa fell to her knees, her golden dress wrinkled on the marble floor. Her perfect makeup ran with her tears. The mask had finally fallen. "Margaret," she cried, "please, think of Daniel. Think of your son." I approached her, bent down to her eye level, and spoke softly but clearly so everyone could hear. "I thought of him. That's why I did all this. To save him from you. IST." Aftermath and rebuilding. The police took her away that same night, but before she left, I approached her one last time. "The truck was never meant for Daniel. It was the price of your freedom. 5 million pesos to unmask a criminal. The best investment of my life." The room was absolutely silent. The guests didn't know where to look. The waiters had stopped serving. Even the mariachis were mute. Daniel continued standing in the same place, like a statue. Daniel looked at me as if it was the first time he'd seen me. There, standing in the middle of the room in his 100,000 peso tuxedo, he looked like a lost child. The same child who cried when he scraped his knees. The one who hugged me when thunder frightened him. "Mom, did you plan all of this?" "No, my son, your wife planned all of this. I was just defending myself." He sank into a chair. The guests began to leave silently, like someone fleeing a funeral. In 15 minutes, the room was empty. Only Daniel, me, Helen Carter, and the lawyer I had brought with me remained. "Mr. Gregory Grant," I said to the lawyer, "explain your legal situation to my son." The lawyer, a 60-year-old man with a bulldog face, opened his briefcase. "Mr. Ellis, your marriage is null and void. Vanessa, or rather Amy Gutierrez, was married when she joined you. That means you were never legally married, and the properties, the bank accounts, everything in both of your names can be claimed only by you. She has no rights to anything. And the baby?" That's when my heart ached, seeing my son ask about a baby that wasn't his. "Daniel," I said gently, "she's pregnant with Jason Miller's child." Her lover admitted it on the recordings. My son, my strong little boy, broke down. He cried like I hadn't seen him cry since his father died. I went over to hug him, but he pushed me away. "Don't touch me. You lied to me, too. You made me believe you were losing your mind to protect you. I didn't need your protection. I needed you to trust me. Trust, Daniel. When I tried to warn you, you yelled at me. You told me I was jealous. You kicked me out of your life. Because she convinced me. That's right. She convinced you so easily, so quickly, and you wanted me to trust you." The truth hit him like a slap in the face. He staggered to his feet and walked toward the exit. "Where are you going? To get drunk until I forget I exist? No. You're going to go home, you're going to sleep, and tomorrow we're going to fix this mess. Together. Together. Mom, you saw the bakeries, right? That's why she couldn't find the money. I didn't sell them. I protected them. They're still ours." Ours. They were always ours, my son. Always. That night I took him home. The house I had paid for, but which for the first time he felt was his. While he slept off his drunken stupor, I reviewed the papers Vanessa had left behind. I discovered more horrors. Loans in my name for 10 million pesos, contracts with phantom suppliers, even a fake labor lawsuit prepared to extort more money from me. The next morning, Vanessa tried to negotiate from the prison where she was awaiting trial. He sent his lawyer, a guy with a face like a rat, who charged 50,000 pesos just to come see me. My client is willing to leave the country if the charges are dropped. She couldn't tell things about her son that would damage his reputation. What things? That he was the victim of a con artist. Everyone already knows that. We have compromising photos. I laughed for the first time, the only time in months. I laughed for real. Edited photos like the ones he used to blackmail Christine Dawson had already been reviewed by an expert. All fake. The lawyer gulped. What does he want then? Justice? Make her pay for every peso stolen, for every lie told, for every day of psychological torture. That could be 20 years in prison. Then make it 30. 48 hours after the birthday, the divorce was complete. Well, the annulment, because there could be no divorce from a marriage that never existed. Vanessa was sentenced to 15 years in prison. It would have been more, but her pregnancy gave her extenuating circumstances. Jason Miller, her lover, fled to Colombia, where he was caught for other frauds. George Lewis, her legal husband, wanted nothing to do with her and returned to Venezuela. The baby was born in prison, a girl. Vanessa's mother, Rose Cole. It took Daniel months to forgive me, not for what I did, but for how I did it, for not trusting him, for treating him like another enemy instead of a victim. But little by little, working together to rebuild the bakeries, we found each other again. We became mother and son again. We became family again. The 5 million pesos truck stayed in the hotel parking lot for weeks until I decided what to do with it. 6 months after that night, I woke up early, as usual. It was 5 in the morning, and the city was just beginning to wake up. I made myself a pot of coffee, as my grandmother taught me, and sat on the balcony to watch the sunrise. The Mercedes-Benz truck remained in the hotel parking lot, gathering dust and spare bills. The bakeries recovered quickly. We fired all the consultants Vanessa had hired. We returned to the original recipes. We rehired the laid-off employees. In 3 months, we recovered 60% of the lost customers. In 6, we were better than ever. But the most important thing wasn't the money we recovered. It was seeing Daniel return to his old self. That afternoon, Daniel and I sat in the office, the same one where I had uncovered Vanessa's first lies, and we spoke, truly, for the first time in years. "Mom, I need to ask for your forgiveness." "No, my son, let me finish. I failed you. I traded you for a woman who promised to make me someone important. I didn't realize I was already someone. I was your son. the son of the strongest woman I know. We cried together, hugging each other like when he was a child and I was his whole world. "And the truck?" he asked afterward. "What are you going to do with it?" "It's yours if you want it." "I don't want it. It reminds me of everything bad." So, the auction was an event, not for publicity. We wanted to keep it low-key, but the story had gotten out. The German ambassador's wife, who had been at the birthday party and saw everything, bought Rachel Green, Mary Lopez, and Carla Johnson. All the employees Vanessa fired are now minority shareholders in the bakeries. Each one owns 5% of the brand, and I still get up at... Vanessa is still in prison. She has 9 years left. Sometimes I hear news about her through her mother. She says she's studying pastry making in prison, that she wants to be reformed, that she asks for forgiveness. I don't hate her. Hatred is giving her too much importance. She simply no longer exists in my world. A week ago, Daniel gave me the best news. He's dating Sophie Montgomery, the daughter of my notary Rebecca Montgomery, a hard-working, honest woman who has her own law firm, specializing in family law. This time is different, Mom. Sophie loves me for who I am, not for what I have. And how do you know? Because I told her the whole story with Vanessa on our first date, and her response was, "Your mother is my hero. I hope one day I'll be half as strong as her." Last night, while the three of us were having dinner together, Sophie told me something that touched my soul. "Mrs. Margaret, thank you for not giving up, for fighting, for teaching us that a mother's love isn't letting her children do whatever they want, but protecting them, even from themselves." And so ends my story, the story of how I gave away a $5 million truck to recover something priceless: my dignity, my family, my life. If this confession touched your heart, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. Comment on where you're watching us from. Tell us if you've experienced something similar, and subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to be victims, because we all have a warrior inside. We just need to remember how to awaken it.